Hi, welcome back for True Colors audiobook. This is chapter 20, and we pick up where we left off last time, which was not in a good place. Michael had summarily rejected Cassie's offer to go to Richmond and live with him as his wife, and it left them without much hope to redeem their marriage. The only true hope Cassie seems to have left is that the escaped patients will get through to Washington and report that she is there. Let's watch and listen and see how Cassie soldiers on now throughout all this.
True Colors, Chapter 20. The trees on the hillsides beyond the stockade walls had taken on the appearance of tall, determined sentries arrayed in bold yellow, orange, and crimson uniforms. I welcomed the cooler weather, and it reminded me of the carefree autumn days of my youth, when Eric and Hannah and I would romp through the woods and roll about in piles of fallen leaves. We'd build forts, heaping the leaves higher than our heads, and pretending we were soldiers in the Revolution fighting off the evil redcoats. Eric was always General Francis Marion, the swamp fox. He'd lead us from the safety of our secret hideout into daring attacks on the British, raiding their supply depots and rescuing captured colonials, all before our mothers called us in for supper. In those days, war was an adventurous, even romantic tale about Minutemen and midnight rides. My lamb-like eyes never saw a cavernous wound or a severed limb. My unsullied ears never heard cries of agony. I never knew what it meant to be held prisoner. Now I dreamed of the day when some modern-day swamp fox would ride through the gates of this camp and free us all, just as we had freed so many invisible prisoners back in the woods of Pennsylvania. Until that day came, there was work to be done, for a very real and very unromantic war raged outside the walls of this stockade. My most troubling charge was Jeremiah Peckinpah, Jem to his comrades. He was the first colored soldier I had as a patient. Afflicted with an abscess on his right leg from a bayonet jab, he had been intentionally neglecting his wound despite our warnings, and it kept reinfecting. He had been brought back to the infirmary by the men in his barrack who could no longer stand the smell of his draining wound. "Jem, it's only by God's grace that you still have this leg," I told him. "I've seen lesser wounds cause greater damage. If you don't start taking better care of this limb, it's going to come off." Jem just stared at the ceiling, but the man on the cot next to him said, "Don't you see, Miss Cassie? That's what he's wanted all along." I stared at him in disbelief. "You don't mean that." "Yeah, he do," Jem answered, then rested his dark eyes on me. "Just let it go, Miss Cassie. Let nature run its course in me." "How could you say such a thing?" "Because I'm better off without the leg. If'n it gets healed, you see, I be strong and sturdy again. Then I go back down to Louisiana and I be made a slave of again. If'n I only got one leg, then I ain't no good to nobody, and I can stay here till the war's over, and I stay free." "Whatever gave you the idea they'd send you back into slavery?" "'Cause it's what they do to colored soldiers who fight agin 'em." "But you're a member of the Federal Army. They can't do that." "Maybe they can't, but they do. And I'd rather live free with one leg than as a slave again with two good ones. A leg be a small price to pay for freedom." "But we're not only talking about your leg. You could get blood poisoning and lose your life." "That's okay too. I still be free." A broad smile of widely spaced yellowish teeth appeared. "Reckon a one-legged dead darky can't pick a whole lot of cotton." The patients around him shared in his sprightly laughter, but I was appalled by such humor. "Jem, I can't stand by and allow this wound to fester, knowing what'll happen. I know it's in your nature to want to make sick people better, but this time, better means letting it go. Please, Miss Cassie, save your healing potions for some poor fella who needs 'em." Looking down at the bottle of nitric acid in my right hand, I agonized over the sincerity of his request, weighing it against the ideals I had lived by since my father first taught me that the knowledge of medicine was one of the most precious gifts God shared with us. My left hand moved to take hold of the cork on the bottle of acid. "Please, Miss Cassie, please don't." His eyes were as beseeching as his voice, and it was with torment that I removed the cork. It was always distressing to use nitric acid on an opened wound because it brought pain to the patient, but it also brought healing, except to Jem. To him, it could bring bondage. "You won't get sent back, Jem. I promise you. Major St. John and I won't let them take you." "You like the dog, don't you, Miss Cassie? He's a good man. And his pappy owns one of the biggest plantations in Georgia. His family got more slaves than a hound dog got fleas." "I don't believe it. Justin wouldn't own any slaves." Jem adjusted himself on the cot, then looked straight up at the ceiling again. "Wouldn't expect you to take the word of no colored man." "Jem, He turned his head away and closed his eyes. I confronted Justin about it later in the medroom. I was stunned when he confirmed without apology that his family owned hundreds of slaves. "So your family has achieved their great wealth by the forced sweat of laborers they didn't have to pay? How can you live with that?" "Our slaves have it far better than the so-called free coloreds in the North who eke out an existence working in factories for 16 hours a day for little more than food money, and they're still not treated as equals. Ours get good food, the best of medical care, and are treated well. I realize it's not that way with all plantation owners, but it is with my family. I'm not proud of the way some coloreds are treated in the North, but at least they have a hope for better things to come. They know they are no man's property, and their children are never sold out from under them. We have never broken up a slave family on our plantation. Never. Look, Cassie, you Northerners just can't understand our way of life here." "Your way of life? You have a patient in there who considers it a way of death. I promised him that you and I would keep him from going back." He shook his head and sighed. "I seem to recall that on the night we met in Uncle William's office, it was you who chided me about making promises I couldn't keep." "Do you mean you won't help him?" "How can I? I've been told that it takes your signature to certify the colored soldiers as fit for labor and for travel. All you have to do is withhold that signature." "What I mean is, if one of our slaves ran away, I'd expect whoever found him to return him. How can I not do the same for someone else?" Such a notion cut deeper than his scalpel. "I can't believe I'm hearing this from you. Besides, Justin, some of those men were never even slaves. How can you send them to the auction block?" "I don't legislate the rules, Cassie. I just follow orders." Disillusionment quickened into anger. I left him standing alone in the medroom and tramped away shouting, "If your slaves have it so great, why would any of them want to run away?" I went right on out through the lean-to and around the corner of the building. My steps arrested as I nearly collided with Powers, who was standing against the wall with his arms crossed, a sordid smirk on his face. "I couldn't help overhearing your conversation with the doc." He gestured with his eyes toward the medroom window next to him. "You self-righteous hussy." He took a step toward me. "Hello, Sergeant Reed," I called to the personable camp quartermaster, who shot me a friendly smile and asked me how I was. I smiled deep inside at the look of umbrage that spread across the chief guard's face, his efforts thwarted. "What's wrong, Powers? Don't you like being on the receiving end of your own tactics?" His malicious eyes bore down on me. "There ain't always going to be someone around, lady. You just remember that." He stormed away. I sighed in relief, feeling quite pleased with myself. My anger at Justin had somehow endowed me with the pluck needed to stand up to my persecutor. "Don't you find yourself in enough trouble, Miss Golden?" came a voice from behind me, "without struggling to make a job of it?" I turned and beheld a man I had never seen before. He looked to be in his 30s, was quite tall, with dark eyes and hair, and more handsome than the law ought allow. His Confederate uniform looked bright and crisp, though devoid of all forms of badges and insignias denoting rank. Though his words, spoken in a mild drawl, had been admonitory, his countenance intimated amicability. "What do you mean by that?" I asked him. "As if being in this place isn't hardship enough, you really oughtn't tangle with Sergeant Powers. You're no match for him. You'd do well to fight shy of him, not banter with him." He turned and began to walk away. "Wait!" He stopped, but didn't turn around. "Who are you? What's your name?" "Name's not important. Just remember what I said." Only rarely thereafter did I see my enigmatic ally around the compound, but I frequently recalled his words and heeded his warning. It was Friday night, and I was going to a dance. To help alleviate the boredom of long hours of darkness as winter approached, the prisoners began to hold regular Friday night dances. I wouldn't have believed such a thing took place had I not already heard of such happenings from patients in Alexandria who had been exchanged prisoners of war. A committee had approached me to respectfully request the honor of my presence at their harvest ball. 2 of the men would provide cotillion music with a harmonica and a banjo. I no sooner entered the barrack than I was surrounded by dozens of men who pleaded with me for a dance. I was nominated for and unanimously voted in as Harvest Queen. I felt quite honored despite the glaring lack of competition. It was decided that the only fair way to allocate dances with the ball queen was to draw numbers from a bowl. Any man who didn't get a turn this night would be eligible for the following Friday's drawing, for I had consented to attend the weekly celebrations from then on. I gaily danced quadrilles with countless partners amidst the whirl of men, half of whom wore blankets wrapped around their waists, as they took the woman's role for the first part of the evening, then switched with those who had maintained their manliness during that time. I was having a hilarious though exhausting time when I took notice of a young man who laid in his bed, facing away from his fellow prisoners as they danced away a measure of the gloom of the war. I went to his bedside. He appeared to be in his early 20s and could have been nice-looking were it not for his morose expression. "Aren't you enjoying the music, soldier?" "Nothing to write home about." His bitter tone chilled me, but I persisted. "Won't you dance with me and have some fun?" "You call this fun?" "Considering where we are, I do. And if you'd get up off your pity pallet and dance, you just might—" He bolted up and flung back his blankets, exposing legs amputated above the knees. I stood motionless, gaping, paralyzed by my monstrous error. A string of crimson oaths pumped out of him like an arterial bleed, halted only when a soldier draped in a woolen blanket came over and backhanded his face. "Don't you ever speak to this woman like that again, Private. Not unless you want your teeth growing out your nostrils." A soldier who had been under my care for several weeks in the infirmary came to my side. "Come away, Miss Cassie. You don't belong round the likes of him." I remained where I was, taking in the devastation before me. Who, then, if not the likes of him? The whipped soldier slowly turned his head toward me, droplets of blood at the corner of his mouth. "He has sacrificed a great deal for the likes of me. Where else do I belong, if not right here?" That soldier and I exchanged a long look. "You'll dance with me one day, soldier. I don't know how or when, but I promise you that before we leave this place, you will have danced with me, even if it takes the Army Corps of Engineers to devise a way." He didn't believe it for 1 minute, or so he appeared to say with his eyes. Later the men told me that Justin had written release orders for that soldier, and he could leave at any time but refused to go home. He'd said that even when the war was over, he'd never go home and make his family face the conundrum of what to do with him. Later, as I walked back to my quarters, a dark figure came darting through the shadows. Powers! Fright surged through my body. I bolted and began to run. "Miss Cassie!" It was Private Margolin, one of the stewards. My pace slowed immediately. My heart took a bit longer. Now I had become a danger to myself, for I was easily panicked by the mere thought of the head guard, and I was well aware of the fact that prey are almost always taken when in a state of blind panic. "Sorry to bother you, but it's Carrollton. He's taken one of his fits again." It was morning before I left the infirmary, having had one minor emergency after another arise. I no sooner had collapsed on my cot when a knock came on the door. I almost began to cry out of sheer exhaustion, but got up, padded to the door, and asked who it was. "Michael." My stomach nodded. I lifted my housecoat from the nail in the door and slipped it on, then unlocked and opened the door. He held a box of provisions that his aide now normally brought. Without speaking, he brushed past me and set the box on the desk. Then he moved to close the door. "I have to talk to you." For a long moment he said nothing, only looked at me with an indiscernible expression. "Well, what about?" "Your measles patients." The knot in my stomach twisted tighter and spread throughout me, but I tried to mask my alarm. "There were lots of measles patients. Which ones? You know exactly which 3 I'm talking about. I came upon you when you were talking to them. You nearly fainted when you saw me, and later when we ran into St. John, you tensed when he asked if there were any new measles cases." "I didn't tense." "Cassie, you had your arm around mine. If you had squeezed any tighter, it would have fallen off. I wondered at the time what was making you so jittery, but it all makes perfect sense now." I opened my mouth to protest further, but knew he had me dead to rights. "I didn't even know there was an escape from this camp until yesterday when I got word the 3 were recaptured." The hope I had kept alive in me over these weeks perished with his words. Are they all right?" "They're fine. They'll be kept at Belle Isle from now on." "So, darlin', were the fake rashes your idea?" I have to admit it was rather ingenious. "Those men came to the infirmary that way. I didn't even recognize the marks as fake at first. And why do you care so much about a simple prison escape? Aren't such matters normally dealt with at a level beneath your position? It became more than a simple prison escape when you used it to gain your retribution." "Retribution? What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about this." He pulled a folded square of paper out of his tunic pocket. Among the articles found on them was this little item. He passed it to me with brusqueness, then stepped back as if he couldn't bear to remain close to me. I opened it and stared at the one word written there. Kelton. I glanced up at him. "I didn't write this." "I know that. It's not your handwriting and you wouldn't have misspelled it. But it doesn't take a master spy to figure out where they got the name." He glared at me through piercing eyes. "Tell me, sweetheart, what would you have done that day if I had called your bluff and actually agreed to take you to Richmond as my wife?" "Bluff? I meant every word I said that day. I was ready to give up everything. Enough, Cassie. You had just come from talking to them. You knew their plan." He closed the distance between us with 2 long, heavy strides. "And you knew that with this—" He snatched the paper from my hand, crumpled it in his fist, and shook it in front of my face. "You were signing my death warrant." I stared at him in astonishment. "You think I—" And I was foolish enough to think that in spite of everything, there was still a glimmer of hope that the love we knew was deeper even than the chasm between us, and would one day force it to close. I've never been so wrong about anything in my life. He spun on one heel and went for the door. "Michael, I was only trying to—" He flung open the door and went out in a rage. I raced after him. He was already mounting his horse. "Is this what you call military intelligence? You didn't even interrogate those men, did you? You're so sure you have it all figured out." He jerked his horse in the direction of the gate and urged him away. "Believe what you want," I whispered aloud as I re-entered my quarters. "The chasm is too great now anyway." The box Michael brought sat unopened on the desk that day. I could not bring myself to go through the items he had probably prepared for me before he came to believe I'd betrayed him. Greater than the anger I felt over his unfairness was the gnawing feeling that he actually believed my intent was to expose his duplicity to Colonel Kelton, thereby bringing about his capture and execution for treason. He was convinced I hated him that much. But that evening he returned. When I opened the door, he stood with his eyes cast away from mine. "I've been to Belle Isle." I hesitated before letting him enter. He stepped to the fireplace and ran his fingers along the mantelpiece, slow to give utterance. "Those three were very loyal to you. They refused to implicate you in any way. But I convinced them that telling the truth about your message to Colonel Kelton was in your best interest, so they recounted the conversation for me." He turned, his eyes resting sullenly on mine. I can't begin to understand, let alone explain, how I got things so twisted. Neither do I comprehend how you could have thought me capable of sealing your doom in that way. I moved to the bed and sat down, wringing my hands on my lap. Yet I, too, am an expert on getting things twisted. Twisted dreams, twisted promises. I related my pledge to Jem and to the amputee. So you see, I have no right to cast the first stone. His blue eyes glistened as he beheld me. "Cassie, do you think... is there any hope for us?" I wished I could have told him that there was.
Well, if you thought that Michael couldn't make matters any worse than he already had, you were wrong. He managed it. But he did seem genuinely repentant about it, and Cassie was very gracious in acknowledging that she too gets many things twisted now. So join them next time and see how things continue on in their relationship, her life in the prison stockade, and what new developments arise. Please like and subscribe, and share these videos with someone you know might enjoy them. See you next time.